There's a road in America where you can still drive past gas stations that haven't served a customer in decades, old motels with empty rooms, and tiny towns where the only thing left is the building itself. These places were once busy stops on Route 66. Cars came through all day, families stopped for food, people bought gas, and local businesses depended on the travelers passing through. Then the highway changed. The traffic disappeared almost overnight, and some of these towns were left behind. Today, you can still find their remains scattered across the old Route 66, sitting quietly in the desert and plains as if nobody ever came back. In this video, we're visiting 7 of those forgotten Route 66 towns, and some of them look almost exactly like they did when the last travelers drove away. Number 7 is Texola, Oklahoma. Our journey begins in western Oklahoma, right near the Texas border, in a tiny place called Texola. Today, it is hard to believe that this quiet little town was once a busy stop for people traveling across America. During the best years of Route 66, Texola had hotels, restaurants, gas stations, stores, and other businesses that depended on travelers passing through town. In 1930, the population reached about 581 people. That may not sound like a huge town today, but for a small community on the open plains, it was a busy place. Travelers needed food, fuel, repairs, and somewhere to sleep, and Texola provided all of it. Then the traffic began to disappear. The development of faster roads and later Interstate 40 changed the way people crossed this part of America. Drivers who once had to pass directly through Texola could now travel much faster without stopping in the town. As the cars disappeared, so did the businesses. The population fell decade after decade, dropping to just 45 people by 1990. Today, only a small number of residents remain, while old buildings and pieces of the town's Route 66 past sit quietly along the road. One of the most recognizable survivors is the old Magnolia service station, a building that has been preserved as a reminder of the town's highway days. What makes Texola interesting is how small and quiet it feels. There is no huge abandoned city here. Instead, you see a handful of old structures surrounded by the wide Oklahoma landscape. Number 6 is Jericho, Texas. Heading west into the Texas Panhandle, we come to a place with a name that sounds like it belongs in an old history book, Jericho. Today, very little remains of this once important little settlement, but its story is one of the most interesting on Route 66. Jericho was established as a railroad stop in 1902, but the area had been used as a travel route long before Route 66 existed. When Route 66 opened in 1926, Jericho found a new purpose. The town sat near the famous Jericho Gap, an especially difficult section of the old highway. The road was made of black clay, and when heavy rain arrived, that clay could turn into deep, sticky mud. Cars could become trapped for hours or even days. Local farmers and residents made money by helping stranded motorists pull their cars out of the mud. For a small town, this was a strange way to make a living. A driver could arrive in Jericho because his journey had gone completely wrong, and the people of the town were ready to help. By the 1930s, Jericho had around 100 residents, along with stores, a filling station, a tourist court, and other businesses. But the town's location would eventually become its weakness. In 1936, Route 66 was moved about a mile north, taking much of the traffic away from Jericho. The town began losing residents, and its post office closed in 1955. Today, Jericho is almost completely silent. What remains includes scattered ruins and the cemetery, surrounded by the enormous open landscape of the Texas Panhandle. But there is an interesting twist to its story. In recent years, the historic townsite has attracted people interested in preserving what remains and possibly bringing new life back to the area. So Jericho is not just a story about a town dying. It is also a story about people trying to save a small piece of Route 66 history before it disappears completely. Number 5 is Glenrio, Texas and New Mexico. Now we reach one of the most recognizable ghost towns along Route 66, Glenrio. And this place is especially unusual because it sits directly on the Texas-New Mexico state line. One side of the old town is in Texas, while the other side is in New Mexico. Today, Glenrio is almost empty, but the remains of its old Route 66 businesses still make it look like a roadside town from another era. Glenrio began as a railroad community. The settlement was originally known as Rock Island, but the railroad renamed it Glenrio in 1908. Even before Route 66 arrived, the location was useful to travelers. When Route 66 became America's famous east-west highway, Glenrio grew into a roadside stop. Travelers could find gas stations, restaurants, motels, and other services here. For people crossing the huge distances between Texas and New Mexico, a place like Glenrio could be an important stop. But Glenrio had one major problem. It depended almost completely on passing traffic. When Interstate 40 was built, drivers no longer needed to use the old Route 66 road through town. The change was devastating. By 1975, the interstate had accelerated Glenrio's decline, and the businesses that once served thousands of travelers were left behind. Today, the Glenrio Historic District contains the old Route 66 roadbed and numerous abandoned structures, including remnants of motels, cafes, service stations, and the post office. Standing among these buildings, you can almost imagine what Glenrio looked like decades ago. Cars would pull in, travelers would walk into cafes, gas pumps would be busy, and motel rooms would be filled at night. Now, there is mostly silence. Number 4 is Montoya, New Mexico. Further into New Mexico, the landscape changes dramatically. The open plains stretch toward the horizon, and hidden along the old Route 66 alignment is Montoya, a tiny community that has nearly vanished. Montoya began as a railroad settlement in 1902. Its early purpose was connected to the cattle ranches in the region, and the railroad made it possible for people and goods to move through the area. When Route 66 arrived, the little community gained another reason to exist. Travelers needed supplies, fuel, food, and a place to stop, and Montoya provided those services. One of the important businesses was Richardson's store, which also served Route 66 travelers. For decades, the store remained part of daily life in Montoya. It eventually closed in the 1970s after its owner died. Today, the old building still stands behind a fence, with vintage gas pumps providing a strong reminder of its highway past. Nearby are old houses, ranch buildings, a cemetery, and the historic Casa Alta house. The interesting thing about Montoya is that it does not look like a Hollywood ghost town. There are no giant signs saying abandoned. There is no dramatic entrance. Instead, the place slowly reveals itself. An old stone building appears in the distance. Then you notice another abandoned structure. Then an old gas pump. Then a church or cemetery. Piece by piece, you realize that this quiet landscape was once a real community. Montoya shows how Route 66 did not only create large tourist destinations. It also connected tiny rural settlements to the outside world. When traffic patterns changed, these places had very little left to keep their economies alive. Montoya became a quiet reminder of a time when the journey mattered as much as the destination. Number 3 is Cuervo, New Mexico. Not far away is another forgotten Route 66 community called Cuervo. Unlike some places on this list, Cuervo was not simply a roadside tourist stop. It began as a railroad town, with its railroad siding established in 1902. A post office opened the same year, and over time the community developed into a small settlement serving local residents and travelers. When Route 66 passed through the area, Cuervo gained new life. Cars replaced some of the old railroad traffic, and businesses appeared to serve motorists. But once again, the same story repeated itself. Interstate 40 was built nearby, allowing drivers to bypass the old Route 66 alignment. The traffic moved away, and Cuervo slowly faded. Today, the town is mostly abandoned, although it has not always been completely empty. Old houses, churches, and other structures still survive among the landscape. Some buildings are made of wood, while others reflect the adobe construction common in this part of New Mexico. The contrast is striking. You can see signs of a community that once had homes, families, work, and daily routines, but much of it is now quiet. There is something especially powerful about places like Cuervo because the buildings are not just empty structures. They represent ordinary lives. Someone once opened a door here every morning. Children once walked these streets. Travelers once stopped nearby for fuel or food. People probably complained about the weather, talked about work, and planned their futures just like people everywhere else. Number 2 is Two Guns, Arizona. If there is one abandoned place on Route 66 that feels like it was made for a strange American road story, it is Two Guns, Arizona. Located near Canyon Diablo between Flagstaff and Winslow, Two Guns was never really a normal town in the traditional sense. It was more of a roadside attraction and tourist stop. But today, its ruins have earned it a reputation as one of the most unusual ghost towns along Route 66. The story of Two Guns goes back to the early 20th century. A trading post and other businesses developed near the old road, and in the 1920s, Harry Indian Miller became closely associated with the place. Miller built a tourist attraction that included a trading post, gas station, and a zoo containing animals such as mountain lions. He also promoted the nearby area and its stories to attract travelers. But the history of Two Guns was far from peaceful. In 1926, Miller became involved in a dispute with Earl Cundiff, who was connected to the property. Miller shot and killed Cundiff and was later acquitted. The strange stories surrounding Miller only added to the unusual reputation of the place. Over the years, Two Guns continued changing. Businesses opened, closed, and reopened. Gas stations and tourist facilities appeared as Route 66 traffic increased. But eventually, the interstate system changed everything. Travelers could move faster and bypass the old roadside attractions. Then, in 1971, a fire destroyed much of the remaining complex. After that, Two Guns was left to decay. Today, the ruins are scattered around the landscape. Old stone walls remain. Pieces of the former gas station can still be seen. The remains of the zoo are one of the most recognizable parts of the site, with faded signs still hinting at what once stood there. Number 1 is Amboy, California. And finally, we reach one of the most famous abandoned Route 66 towns in the Mojave Desert, Amboy, California. Amboy is surrounded by one of the harshest landscapes along the entire Mother Road. There are long stretches of desert, almost no shade, and enormous distances between communities. But when Route 66 opened, this isolated location suddenly became valuable. Travelers crossing the desert needed somewhere to stop, and Amboy became one of those essential roadside places. The town itself has much older roots. Amboy was first settled in 1858, and railroad development helped establish it as a desert settlement. But Route 66 changed everything. In 1926, the road helped turn Amboy into a boom town. Then, in 1938, Roy's Motel and Cafe opened and became one of the most famous roadside businesses in the desert. For decades, Roy's was a symbol of the open road. Cars arrived after crossing miles of empty desert. Travelers could buy fuel, eat, rest, and continue their journey. The famous sign and futuristic-looking roadside buildings became part of the visual identity of Route 66. But the rise of Interstate 40 changed Amboy's future. Once the new highway allowed drivers to cross the desert without passing through the town, business dropped dramatically. Amboy became almost completely deserted. For years, the town looked as though it had simply been abandoned to the desert. But Amboy's story did not end there. In 2005, businessman Albert Okura purchased the town and worked to restore and promote its Route 66 landmarks. His efforts helped bring attention back to Amboy, and his family has continued working with the town's legacy after his death in 2023. So Amboy is slightly different from the other places on our list. It is no longer simply a forgotten ghost town. It is a place trying to survive by remembering what it once was. And that makes it perhaps the perfect final stop for this journey. Because Route 66 itself is now a piece of history. The highway was officially decommissioned in 1985, but its story never really disappeared. Some towns survived. Some reinvented themselves. And others were left behind, their old buildings slowly disappearing under the sun, wind, and time. When people think about Route 66, they often imagine neon signs, classic cars, colorful diners, and the freedom of the open road. But there is another side to the Mother Road that is just as fascinating. It is the side where the road ends.